Our first keynote speaker today is Dr. Stephen Murgatroyd from Canada. He's an experienced educational administrator, writer and entrepreneur. He was formerly Dean of Business at Athabasca University in Canada, where he launched the world's first online MBA program in 1993-94. He owns and leads 3 companies, has written more than 40 books and more than 100 papers and book chapters. He's currently working with the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand and the Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University in Dubai. He's the CEO of the Collaborative Media Group. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Murgatroyd.
Thank you. I'm here for 3 reasons. One is I'm old. In fact, I'm so old, my blood type has been discontinued. When I was born, the Dead Sea was mainly on the sick list. So that's one reason. I'm old, and I've been around for a long time and seen lots of things happening. Second reason I'm here is, as was just mentioned, I'm currently working in a number of jurisdictions around the world, in North America, in the Middle East, in New Zealand, and in Europe. And in that work, I get to see some of the really creative things that are going on in this sector. But I also get to see some of the problems that we're about to experience. And the third reason I'm here is that, well, apart from needing the money, no, my wife sent me. We've been married for 48 years, but I've been on the road for most of that time. And so actually, she works out, she's only seen me for 16 of these years. So this is the secret to a long marriage. But the third reason I'm here is I get paid by a number of organizations to ask questions about the future. And in particular, to look at the future of learning, skills, and technology. And as a corporate CEO, these are my preoccupations too in trying to recruit, retain, and develop staff in a technology-driven company. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you some pieces of a jigsaw. The jigsaw is 12 pieces, and they're all components of the future. Here's the problem, though. Most jigsaws come with a picture on the box. We don't have that picture on the box. And in fact, for each country in this room, and for each organization in this room, you're going to have to create your own picture on the box. Because these 12 variables will be different in each place. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you a brief history of the future. Then I want to talk about the implications of that for colleges and polytechnics. I've written off universities, written them off. They're nice places. I'm a recovering academic. I'm a has-been. But I don't see them as critical to all sorts of things that are critical to our economies. They're important, but not critical. I used to be a psychotherapist. I used to treat schizophrenics, depressives, and people with anxiety and stress. And now I consult for cabinet ministers around the world. It's the same work, just better pay. And in particular, I want to highlight some issues that I think the Polytechnic should be very conscious of. As you gather from the accent, this is English. I'm a Brit by birth, but a Canadian by nature. And I grew up in Bradford in Yorkshire, which was the home of Bradford Polytechnic. And Eric Robinson was the president and CEO of the Polytechnic and wrote a very important book called The New Polytechnics in 1966, in which he said that these are the critical institutions for all of our future, and that if we become like universities, we've lost the plot. Anybody from Britain in the room will know that Britain lost the plot some time ago. So, let's get going. The first thing I want to talk about is demography. Demographics are going to radically change who we serve and how we serve them. I'm a Canadian. In Canada, our dependency ratio, the number of people in work to those number of people out of work, is about to go from 4 to 1, 4 people in work for every one of us who are senior or too young to work, to 2 to 1, half the workforce in the next 20 years. That's dramatic, but that's also going to take place in a very large number of other countries. Some countries have actually got such a significantly aging population, Japan being the most critical, that they're actually going to have real struggles just to survive economically. So I think this demographic issue is really quite important. Other countries in this room are experiencing a surge of young people. And even in Canada, we have parts of Canada, Alberta, the lower mainland of British Columbia, which are doing really well from a population replacement point of view. But as a nation, we're not. So demography is going to be one of these jigsaw pieces that we need to understand a lot more, since it will impact revenues for government, impact who we serve, and how we serve them. Shift happens. This is a thing I hear in chief executive's office all the time. Shift happens. I think that's what they're saying. But really what's going on is there's a shift of wealth, power, and authority from old economies to new economies. So wealth is shifting rapidly to Asia. Business is shifting rapidly to Asia. 50% of the world's $1 billion corporations are now headquartered in Asia. And according to PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG, 75% of them will be in Asia by 2030. And so a huge shift of where power and economic drivers are going to be. Another piece of the jigsaw, globalization. This is the BMW Mini. I still teach a graduate course in the MBA at Athabasca, and I took some of my students to Cowley in Oxfordshire in England, where the BMW is made. There are round about 15 trillion parts, combinations for that car, sourced from a large number of countries just in time. So if you're in Oxford, you'll see trucks arriving there from 70 countries delivering parts of that factory, which is essentially staffed by robots with a small core of people to maintain the robots. They produce a brand new car every 61 seconds. When I quit working for other people and started working for myself, first thing I did, having not yet told the wife that I'd quit, was buy an espresso machine, because I thought this would please her. I thought I'd go home and give her this and then say, by the way, I quit working today. I don't recommend this, young people. Not a good plan. I have Nespresso pods from 14 countries in my house, coffee from 14 countries. Nespresso pods are recycled, and that recycled product goes to 9 countries. So we live and work and operate in a global world. In my own company, we have program developers in Afghanistan, Vietnam, Silicon Valley, and Edmonton, Alberta. I can get coding support from anywhere in the world at any time. It's a global game. 9.5, 10 billion people quite soon. This is a big shift. We have to work out how to feed these people. We have to work out how to clothe them. More importantly, we have to work out how to leverage their skills, knowledge, and understanding in the service of mankind. So the planet is in peril. I know Donald Trump. I try to get through this whole thing without mentioning Donald Trump, but it's very difficult. Climate change is real, and we need the skills of everybody on the planet working collaboratively to solve a whole raft of problems. And so collaboration is the DNA of the knowledge economy. Collaboration is not a nice to have, it's mission critical for the planet. And so we need to demonstrate what collaboration looks like every day in our own work and operations. You're going to hear a lot in the next few days about the impact technology will have. And I'll come on to this in terms of work in a minute. I'm a diabetic, type 2. And every day I used to have to prick myself with a needle and try and get the blood on this little slip and see what my blood glucose level was. I don't need to do that anymore. I have an implant that now automatically feeds this data to my cell phone. And automatically it sends that to my doctor. It's not funny. She thinks it, my doctor thinks it is, because she's going to take me off the meds, because by controlling through this implant here in my arm, I can actually now manage my life a lot better than I could just a year ago. Implants are just one thing that we're seeing. Cognitive implants to improve brain function are now going to be standardized within the next 2 years. The FDA in the States have already approved some of these for Alzheimer's patients to improve memory. But we're going to see loads and loads of technology changing the nature of work, changing the nature of organizations, changing our relationships with each other. I just want to show two very quickly. One is from the University of Manchester. This shows the 3D printing of an artificial cornea, this part of the eye. Just watch this. So we can now actually deal with eyesight loss very, very rapidly by deploying these 3D printers around the world. Sorry, I meant Newcastle, not Manchester. Now, that's remarkable, but it gets better. Google announced a partnership with the Maudsley Hospital in London. Google has partnered with them over the last 2 years to create instant diagnosis of eye disease for 50 different eye diseases. So rather than taking 6 to 8 weeks to diagnose an eye problem, this technology can do it within 30 seconds, which means doctors can now spend their time treating patients rather than trying to work out what's wrong with them. And Google's reliability is as high as 19 of the leading specialists in the world all collaborating to look at the same set of eye data and eye images. So technology is changing healthcare. 30% of British households get their goods, their food, delivered to home. It's a 145 million sterling a week business, which I helped to introduce to Tesco in the year 2000. This is how that gets done. Every one of these carts is a robot, and the space that they're in is a food packaging area. I'm not going to play all of this. "28 people staff that factory. It's huge. There are 9 of those across the UK. And so here's an example of a company teaching its staff to dance with robots, which is something we're all going to have to do. We're going to have to dance, find a way of partnering with technology to deliver outstanding service quickly and efficiently. We've all heard in this room of Georgia Tech and the story of Jill Watson, where a prof used Jill Watson, which is IBM Watson, as his tutorial assistant. And the students loved connecting with Jill, who was terrifically responsive, 24/7, had all sorts of answers, produced new video material for them, found new resources to help with their problems, to the point at which the students nominated Jill Watson to be Prof of the Year at Georgia Tech. Fortunately, the actual prof intervened and said, I don't think the people on campus would appreciate IBM Watson winning this prize. But we're going to find more and more technologies that change our life in all sorts of ways, and they're going to change jobs. Most of the more recent studies suggest that between 25 and 40% of all work of all kinds, not just blue-collar work, but all work of all kinds, will be impacted by technology with some significant job loss. We already are seeing driverless trucks going across Texas and drones starting to deliver goods in parts of Europe. And so we're going to see massive impacts of technology that will change the practice of work. This is where we're going to have to dance with robots. But we're also seeing a change in the nature of work. So this phrase, the gig economy, where people like me can choose to work or not work, and can choose what work to do with whom, when, is becoming the new norm. 20% of all Australian jobs are in the gig economy. 40% of Canadian jobs are in the gig economy. The gig economy will be the economy. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm simply observing that it is the case that this will happen. A survey at the University of Alberta this last summer suggested that over 30% of the students had no intention of any kind of seeking a full-time job. They wanted to work in the gig economy to find work-life balance. They looked at their parents and said, we don't want to be slaves to work. We want to live our lives as people engaged in social action and the community. They were looking for the gig economy to give them a space to do something different. This has really big implications because gig workers don't have a lot of benefits unless the courts have ruled, as they have in the UK, for example, that you have to have certain minimum rights guaranteed, rights to health, rights to vacation, rights to maternity and paternity leave. But this pattern change of what work is not trivial. The British Labour Party, which could form a government at some point if Theresa May stops dancing, has actually said today that they're thinking of introducing the four-day week as norm. So, we're looking at changes in the nature of work. And I think we should also look at new kinds of organizations. When I founded my current company, we had 16 staff in an office. We had significant rental overheads. We had all sorts of meeting requirements and so on. My core team now is 2. And we have no office space. We're a virtual organization. We have 3 major banks as clients. We're a multi-million-dollar company. And we have no real infrastructure. We're a kind of Uber-like network organization. I've worked for consulting companies. I ran a consulting company in the UK, 150 consultants out of 3 rooms. And we did work for basically every single Fortune 500 company, but we didn't really have a lot of infrastructure. We were a very early Uber-like consulting shop. In fact, I was talking to the CEO of Shell one day, and he said, how many staff do you have? I said, how many staff would you like me to have? I can hire as many people as I need. It depends what you want us to do. So I think we're looking at new kinds of organizations that change how we think about work, how we think about the organization of work, and where work gets done. I work globally. There is this thing called video conferencing, We have fantastic platforms. D2L is here. Fantastic platform, not just for teaching and learning, but for collaboration. So I think this is the kind of new form of organization, new forms of work, leveraging technology to make a difference to what it is that people do. All of this requires all of these soft skills of collaboration, critical networking, enabling networks to function, team building, team processing, knowledge sharing, knowledge management. These are all skills every single person coming out of your institutions needs to have. Now, this is the bad news. The world no longer has business cycles. We have debt cycles. Just some of the numbers on this slide should scare the hell out of everybody in this room. A recent study of unfunded pension liabilities in just a small number of countries suggests that there are $400 trillion of unfunded pension liabilities that come due in 2050. That's kind of like tomorrow. On top of which, global debt from all sources, government, corporate, personal, city, state, province, is $249 trillion. So the IMF warned this week that the world is on the edge of the largest recession in the history of economics. That austerity that we are used to, all of us in this room have been through some kind of form of austerity, we ain't seen nothing yet, according to the IMF. And so one of the things that you're doing is trying to diversify your income base, but also building up reserve. I think we should be looking at radically refitting the way in which we think about money in our economies, and particularly in our public service, because governments are going to be in serious trouble in the next 5 to 10 years. Next. Oxfam produced a report on Thursday that said that 82% of the wealth generated on this planet in 2017 went to 1% of the population, and that 50% of the population gained nothing, gained no advantage whatsoever, no progress whatsoever in their earnings or spending power in 2017 from the growth of the world economy. Inequality is growing rapidly, especially in the old economies of the world. The United States, Britain, and to some extent Canada are getting more seriously involved in making inequality worse, not better. So income inequality is a massive problem for us. The irony is that one of the groups that's doing really well is people with advanced trade skills. So people with low-level trade skills are kind of struggling. The middle class is struggling. But people with advanced trade skills can move through the economy reasonably quickly. Take a look at some of the data that you can find in your own local economy that looks at what that looks like. And my last piece of the jigsaw before I get to the implications of all of this is this issue. We have young people in the room, and I'm so pleased to see you here because it's critical we build up a cadre of leadership of young people. But I'm a psychologist, and I work in volunteer in mental health work, and mental health issues for young people are getting to be more and more serious. If you haven't read Jean Twenge's book, iGen, where she looks at the I generation, all those people born after the Apple iPhone was created, and looks at how they're using social media and how their addiction to social media is reshaping the way they think about self, and connects this to mental health, then we have a growing problem of the sense of self. But it's not just young people who are struggling. Britain now has a minister for loneliness. I thought it was going to be Margaret Thatcher because nobody ever talked to her. So they have a minister for loneliness because seniors are becoming disconnected from community, disconnected from family, and disconnected from self. And so I'm running a consultation with the Side School of Business at Oxford, Ashridge and others in Toronto in November. And it's looking at health and education and wealth and poverty and all these kind of things. But one of the biggest issues that absolutely everybody who's coming to this event, and we have some 6 Nobel Prize winners coming, is this issue of identity. Who are we, and what does it mean to be me in this kind of world that's in the middle of these massive changes? One of the links that a Nobel Prize winner who created Doctors Without Borders has is between this question of identity and the opioid crisis that we experience in North America and other parts of the world. What is it that people are looking for by the search for a high through drugs? But here's the piece of research that really tweaked my interest. Researchers at Queen's University looked at what is it that young people post on Instagram or WhatsApp and Facebook. And so they interviewed 8,000 young people. And what they discovered was they are not talking about themselves, they're talking about a persona, the self they would like to be, the self they want to present to the world. The kind of, I've always wanted to be David Beckham. There are some barriers to this fantasy. One is I can't kick a ball, but I would project myself as if I was a David Beckham-like person in my Facebook tweet and my tweeting and all that kind of stuff. But this is what young people are actually doing. They're presenting an image of the person they would always want to be, but it isn't actually them. And so we have this growing split between who we really are and the identity we present to other people. That is a growing problem. So, I'm suggesting these are 12 pieces of a jigsaw, from demography through to austerity, through to identity, are all pieces of a jigsaw. So what's it got to do with you? Well, here's what I see going on with colleges and polytechnics around the world at the moment. These are the 5 things we see them all trying to work at doing. Trying to reimagine how they do business. Modular, stackable credentials, the matrix kind of learning in which we match and pair courses from one discipline with another, so that a learner can build their own Lego kind of set of the learning they need for a job. But we can also respond rapidly to developments like mechatronics and other kind of things where we need to put together pieces of a jigsaw quickly. So the Kentucky college system, for example, went to 365 admission, 365-day admission, call the exam when you're ready. Let's actually modularize and stack everything we do. A module could be 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, didn't need to be a semester long. Let's rethink the whole model. So that's an example of that. We're all kind of preoccupied with faculty collective agreements, but those of us in the Uber world are not. We can rent and hire wherever we want. When I created the world's first online MBA in 1066, because that's what the internet was like in 1993-94. It was slow. You could type an email, go on vacation, come back, still be on its way. We could actually get support for learning from anywhere in the world. So Woolf University, I don't know whether you've seen this development from Oxford, Woolf University is using AI and blockchain to manage the infrastructure so that they can rent profs to teach in a tutorial-like model from anywhere in the world. So unconstraining the supply of labor is another thing that they're doing. Hyperscaling platforms for global reach. I mentioned that I used to work at the Open University in the UK. I'm okay now. I've got these tablets they gave me when I left. Little blue ones. Terrific. Gets me up in the morning. One of the things the Open University did some years ago was to create FutureLearn, which is a kind of hybrid MOOC platform. Now, MOOCs are still a big business. 85 million people registered for a MOOC in 2017. 85 million people. But FutureLearn is partnering with institutions to offer micro-credentials and degrees through MOOCs. They currently have 15 degrees, including degrees from Deakin, available through the MOOC platform. But their intention is by 2020 to have 200 degrees, certificates, and diplomas, and to move aggressively into your space, into vocational qualifications, by 2020 as well. And so what we're seeing is a platform in which you partner with a global player to get a global audience that doesn't have to come to campus to hyperscale what it is that you have to increase global reach. And all of this is about securing new markets. So you're looking for new markets for what you have now, but also to rethink what you have now so you can attract new markets. Kentucky found that by modularizing and stacking micro-credentials, two-week, three-week courses, they actually reached 5,000 more people than they'd had at any other time in their history. But they were different customers from the ones they normally got. So that's what everybody's working at. I want to look at what I think are 6 big implications of what I'm seeing around the world, just to plant some seeds in your mind. One of the contexts for this, and my friends from New Zealand will tell you more about this if you're interested, but I was in New Zealand early in the year, in February, and there was a full-page ad from the leading employers of New Zealand, essentially saying, we're no longer interested in credentials, right? We're not interested in diplomas and degrees. We want to know what people can actually do. It's shocking. Can you actually do it? I have a degree. Well, can you do anything? Well, no, I have a degree. What's it in? Psychology. Well, can you do therapy? Oh, no. Can you do statistics? Well, I failed at. What can you actually do? Well, I have a degree. So they're saying this is all nonsense. And in fact, 25 of the largest corporations in the consulting world now delete your qualifications when reviewing job applicants. They actually want to know what you can do. So the e-portfolio is more important than the certificate. So here in that kind of context, here are some things I think are important. Flexible learning systems, which means that I, as a learner, am going to drive my agenda, and your job is to make my agenda possible. This is not how we've behaved historically. Historically, I had to fit into your agenda. Now you have to fit into mine, because I'm your customer. And I have urgent needs. I've just got a job. I need to know all about this robotics thing, because I'm going to manage that plant I just showed you. Or I'm in charge of setting up those 3D printers around the world to print those artificial corneas, or artificial knees, or artificial kidneys, or artificial pancreases, all of which we will be able to do in the next 2 or 3 years. But I don't know how to create this network of resources. Your job is to help me do that. I start 6 weeks from now. Well, we have a course starting in September. I don't care. I need it now. So flexibility means responsiveness, and it means being able to personalize the learning agenda, personalize the pathway. Personalize that pathway. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I think the new sexy, the new black, is assessment. There's a growing number of institutions, University of Wisconsin is one of them, where I don't have to take any courses, I don't have to go to campus, I just have to say, I'm ready to be assessed for this competency and capability. Western Governors University has been doing this for 20 years. Wisconsin, you can get a Bachelor of Nursing degree, which is the professional entry requirement, by assessment only. So I think assessment is what we should be looking at. One of the things we're doing, one of the things the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand is doing is creating an assessment center that will be independent of courses to enable this to happen for the whole country. So we can think differently about what our job is. Some people want learning through courseware. Some people need learning through experiences. Some people are ready to be assessed because they've been doing the work for a long time. Third thing, and one of the reasons we're all here, is we have to stop thinking that we're based in this little community and this is our market. We have to see collaboration, taking those learners and shipping them off somewhere else for a period of time to learn about another place is a hugely life-transforming thing. For the last 6 years, those of us in Alberta that work with young people have been moving them around the world to experience some of their high school learning and first year of college somewhere else in the world, particularly in Scandinavia or in Iceland or in Singapore or in other parts of the world. Almost without exception, these young people come back transformed as more self-empowered, confident, enabled young people. So whilst we ship them off to learn some subject matter, they come back as transformed, empowered, and engaged young people, which is what will happen to you 36 people as a result of being here, I hope. But this is powerful, and we should do this for every student somehow, even if it's for just a short period of time. We also need to think about, and part of that is about building these collaborative networks to enable this thing to happen. Historically, we've competed with each other to capture students and get that revenue. Cut this out. Our job is to enable learning. And if we can do that collaboratively, that's great. But I think the key to all of this is to see our job as being about enabling learning at any time and building our alumni base so that they feel confident in their lifelong learning quests. I'd like just to mention in closing some cautions for polytechnics. As I mentioned, I'm a Brit by birth, and the polytechnic sector in the UK all but disappeared, which is a tragedy. They all wanted to become universities. And I understand. I mean, there was, an ambition at the time. This was the late 60s, early 70s. Thatcher didn't like colleges. Actually, she didn't like anybody, as far as I could tell. There's this wonderful moment where I'm in with Margaret Thatcher as a union representative, and she just abolished tenure for universities in the UK. And the union leader, Clive Jenkins, said to her, "Ma'am, you do realize that this will lead to professors protesting in the streets?" And she said, "Yes, Clive, but nobody will care." She was dead right. So I think we have to start thinking about the power of polytechnics on the applied research side and connecting that to the future of work. So for example, your minister was talking about the infrastructure and the construction challenges that you face. So do we. We have exactly the same issue in Ontario. But 3D printing of buildings, 3D printing of materials for buildings, the use of new materials for buildings, doesn't find itself very quickly into our programs. And yet we could solve some of the housing crisis for Indigenous people by 3D printing properties and using our students and our programs to enable that to happen. So I think polytechnics and advanced colleges and things like degreed apprenticeships are critical parts of all of our future. So I'd like to encourage the polytechnics in this room to see themselves as the vanguard for the advanced work that we need to do for higher level skills. And one of the great institutions that represents that is right here in Melbourne at RMIT, where you can still do apprenticeships and go right through to an applied doctorate. And it's all laddered and it's all connected. I think that's a wonderful example of what the opportunity can be. It's run by Mr. Martin Bean, of course, who used to be the Vice Chancellor of the Open University. So here's my closing slide. I think we're headed for more significant change than most of us in this room have seen in the last 25 years. As I say, I'm old. I've seen lots of transformation. I've seen lots of change. But the 12 pieces of the jigsaw are all beginning to click into place quite quickly. Some of them are urgent. Think about Canada. We're halving our workforce in the next 12 years. We have to double immigration just to stay the same, which creates great opportunities for our colleges, but also great challenges for our colleges and schools. So it's a time of significant change. All bets are off. It's time to reinvent. It's time, actually, for courage. And so one of the things that I think is critical for you to understand is that the next generation of leaders of successful colleges and polytechnics will be those people who show terrific courage in change, because change is the agenda. Thank you.